On April 20th, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, killing 11 workers, causing the largest marine oil spill in history. This is the real story of some of those on board.
What happened in the Deepwater Horizon was that initially there was so much attention. It was on the news every day, and there was the counter that said how many barrels of oil had spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. But eventually they stopped the oil from spilling, and the news cycle did what the news cycle does. There was a new story.
Everybody remembers the BP oil spill that covered the coast of Louisiana and the Gulf Coast states. But what really was the most important thing that happened is what happened to the injured crew members and those that lost their lives.
I want to update the American people on the status of the BP oil spill, a catastrophe that is causing tremendous hardship in the Gulf Coast, damaging a precious ecosystem, and one that led to the death of 11 workers who lost their lives in the initial explosion.
Deepwater Horizon was hands down the worst maritime catastrophe in the history of the United States.
It didn't take long for Kurt and I to recognize the enormity of this case, the importance of this case.
Calls started coming from across the country from different crew members in different roles and assignments throughout the rig. And ultimately, they needed help because their company had turned their back on them.
I know that you are working very hard to find those 11 missing workers. They are the 11 that are not accounted for. So 126, I believe, were rescued. 11 are missing. Where's the search for them? How is that being concentrated?
Search is it's still concentrated primarily around the rig. It has expanded somewhat by several square miles, obviously with some currents. Weather conditions out there right now are favorable for our search. And we've had helicopters out there. We've had a couple of cutters at a time out there. We continue. As long as the Coast Guard feels there's a probability that they're still alive, we're going to continue searching.
It was a Transocean rig and primarily Transocean crew that had been sent on site to drill a BP well. But ultimately what it came down to is that BP ignored the warning signs of the terrible pressure that was unleashed on the rig that ultimately caused it to explode, because they were trying to get the well completed and they had a schedule and they were behind schedule and they put money over the safety of the crew.
Next thing you know, while everybody's focused on congressional hearings and late night news, Transocean was going through and minimizing its liabilities.
The 193-page report is quite literally a catalogue of errors. As oil and gas started pouring up the well, it took 40 minutes for the crew to notice. By the time they did, the flammable mixture wasn't diverted over the side, but through a separate system that carried it onto the rig. This meant the oil and gas clouded potential ignition sources on the rig. As a result, fire prevention systems were overwhelmed, and it's thought flammable gas was sucked into the engine rooms, where it ignited.
At one moment you're going about your day, you're doing your job, you're working hard, and the next minute everything around you is on fire. Loud noises, explosions, heat everywhere. You don't know who's alive, who's dead. You have nowhere to go, nowhere to run, because you're stuck literally in the middle of the ocean. And all you want to do is get in touch with your loved ones. You want to get to safety. But instead of letting that happen, they kept these people up for days at a time, locked them in a hotel room, and would not let them go until they gave a statement or until they tried to force them to sign a release.
Kurt Arnold is a lawyer for some of the workers. He joins us now. Kurt, how soon after the explosion are you saying the company tried to get these workers to sign these waivers?
Good evening, Anderson. What you really need to understand is that the litigation machine took place right away. That most of these survivors were on a boat that should have gone to shore, but instead they kept them out right by the drilling rig, watching the fires, essentially where their friends had perished and were missing. And they kept them there so that I think that they could get their litigation machine essentially in place. And so they get to shore 40 to 48 hours after the accident, and before they can go home, and before they can even go see the doctor of their request, they're asked to sign a statement saying, the prepared statement by an insurance adjuster saying that they're not injured.
The first thing they do after every one of these events is do what they did here. They go to the widow that's not represented by a lawyer, or they go to the injured crew member who has no idea what his future is or what his medical treatment is, and they offer him a little bit of money.
And they would go to individuals and they prey upon, hey, you're a company guy, you've been with us a long time, we're gonna take care of you, we're all in this together, let us throw a concert.
People were saying, Kurt, I don't know what to do. The company says they're gonna take care of me. And I said, just wait, here's my cell phone. A few weeks later, Transocean sends out a letter to every one of their injured crew members, and it says, we will give you 6 months' pay. You will give a release of BP, Transocean, Halliburton, every defendant involved. You will not file a lawsuit in exchange for 6 months' pay, which in most cases was $50,000 or $60,000. And if you don't, your employment with us is terminated.
I mean, can you imagine being hurt on the Deepwater Horizon and signing away your life for $50,000 or $80,000? Right? These are guys who are making $100,000, $150,000 a year. It's not even 6 months' wages. It's insulting.
What Transocean's ultimate goal was, and BP's ultimate goal was how do we save a few dollars?
That's when they got more aggressive.
The head of British Petroleum pulls no punches on his initial reaction to this disaster.
Initially, I was very shocked. I was angry.
We understand that BP has interviewed the crew of this oil rig. What have they told you about the circumstances and the conditions that night on the oil rig?
I think it's far too early in the investigative process to speculate on the events and what transpired.
It was so crazy. These are people that are really hurt really bad. And Transocean sent them a letter that said, you need to get back to work. And if you don't get back to work, we're going to fire you.
They told me that they no longer pay for my wages and I'd have to go back to work. If not, then I was pretty much out of luck.
Yeah, you work for a company for 20 years. You don't think they're trying to screw you?
It's a trick. It's a scam. It's a way for them to save money and escape responsibility for what they've done.
They were constantly trying to get me back to work as quickly as they could. I realized at that point that I could not, at that time, go back offshore, and still to this day don't know that I ever could.
And so when Kurt and I saw what happened to the workers on the Horizon, we knew that not only do we have to make it right for them, we had to make sure that we improved safety industry-wide.
And so we started, small town by small town, going and seeing them, sitting in their kitchen.
I worked on a third of the crew members' cases, including one of the 11 death cases from that case. The president was calling people, trying to meet with survivors, and then there was dealing with the defense lawyers. And they sent down a team of what they called high-powered negotiators. And they thought that these fancy negotiators would somehow intimidate us. And we looked them in the eye and said, we'll see your team in court. Get ready, here we go.
So we were pushing for trials. We were pushing for priority for our clients.
First and foremost, I told the court the most important thing is you must take care of the families of the crew members. They are the ones that are hurting from this the most. It's not an economic claim, it's not an environmental claim, it's their livelihoods.
One of the ways that BP and Transocean defended itself in this lawsuit was to try to rely on an ancient, outdated law that basically said that if you get hurt or you get killed on water, working on the water, then you have less rights than someone that gets hurt or killed working on the land. And so BP and Transocean said, we're gonna avoid doing the right thing. We're gonna avoid taking responsibility for the lives we've ruined by hiding behind this law from the 1800s. And we said, that's not right.
We were in Congress, lobbying.
We were up there, we're representing families who'd just been blown up by just some of the worst practices around.
On the other side of our cases, you have to remember that generally they have unlimited resources. Was there pressure? Yeah, but the pressure's good. The pressure keeps you focused, like razor focused on getting the right result. For me to do my job
right? I've got to put enough pressure on the company. And they say, we don't care what it costs, make it go away.
And then we gathered all the facts, gathered all the evidence, took all the depositions, and put together to show why it was that these greedy decisions put profits over safety, killed many, and put all these other crew members at risk. Ultimately, for our clients, we were able to get the highest settlements in the country, the largest U.S. settlement for somebody who lost their life offshore in U.S. history. And the other crew members got the largest settlement in history, certainly the largest in the Deepwater Horizon, because at the end of the day, we weren't interested in their overtures in the beginning. We were interested in ensuring that we discovered the truth, and we were interested in making sure that our clients were taken care of forever.
The company has agreed to pay $4 billion to settle all criminal claims, a fine more than 3 times higher than the previous record payment made by the drug company Pfizer in 2009.
After the Deepwater Horizon, it showed that our firm is up here and everybody else is down here.